We grade the entirety of the Baltimore Ravens 2022 draft class and more next year on Locked On Ravens.
You are Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
And we return here with another episode of Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Ostreicher of Ravens Wire. Of course, we're here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you for making Locked On Ravens your first listen of the day. We're free and available on all platforms, including on YouTube. And we're back here with a Thursday episode. We're getting closer and closer to the 2022 season. It's not super close, but now that the draft is over, we can look ahead to OTAs and training camp and the preseason. So there's a little bit of downtime right now, but I think before we all know it, it's going to be time for the 2022 season to kick off. But here today, I want to grade the Ravens 2022 draft class. I know that this might be a little later than some other people who have put out grades, and I've put out my written grades on Ravens Wire, but I did just want to talk about it today on the show and put out my official grades in podcast form. So in the second and third segments, we will be going through that. In the second segment, we'll look at days 1 and 2 for the Ravens. In the final segment, we'll look at day 3. In the first segment, though, I want to talk a little bit about what Joe Hortiz had to say about some of the Ravens draft class yesterday. Some nice sound bites in there about just how this organization views the players they drafted, and he was asked some questions about them by the media, so very insightful there. So a ton to talk about here today on the show. Before we get into the content, though, if you're here with us on YouTube and video forms, you can see my face and my background. Welcome in or welcome back if you are new to the channel. I greatly appreciate if you would subscribe, like the video. It does help out a ton. Our next goal here on Locked On Ravens is 2,000 subscribers. We put out daily Ravens content 5 days per week, Monday through Friday. So if you want daily Ravens updates and news and analysis, we have it here for you on this channel. And it's the same thing in audio form as well. If you're here with us in anywhere you get your podcast, so that's Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, welcome in or welcome back. And be sure to follow us, turn notifications on so you know when our content comes out. I appreciate all the audio listeners as well. And also be sure to follow me on Twitter at KAllstriker34 and the Locked On Ravens account at Locked On Ravens. So let's talk about some of what Joe Hortiz had to say. Well, actually, first, we have to get past the Justin Tucker holdout rumor portion of the show, which is going to be about 15 seconds. Here's the spoiler. There are no holdout rumors because there's no holdout. There's no holdout. There was a fake rumor that was kind of put out there by Cleveland media, and it was kind of just something made up, and it actually made like decently big headlines throughout the Baltimore community, Baltimore Ravens Twitter. So just something that, I guess it just happens sometimes, and I don't know what the whole motive behind it was where they blatantly lie, but yeah, Justin Tucker took to Twitter, so he saw it obviously and said, yeah, I'm not holding out. And so just wanted to, if anybody was concerned about that or wasn't sure, just wanted to clear that up, that Justin Tucker is not holding out if you did see a rumor about that and weren't caught up on everything going on with that situation. But yeah, Joe Hortiz had a lot to say to the media on Wednesday, and he talked a little bit about Jordan Stout, the punter, and he ended up saying, quote, we were at the Senior Bowl with Ozzie before practice, and he was like, he might be the best punter on the field. He's just banging balls, jumps off of his foot, end quote. And it feels like when Ozzie Newsome is praising somebody like that, you almost have to take him with how respected Ozzie Newsome is in that franchise. But really, I think the surprise of the draft for a couple people, and obviously there were a lot of surprises during 2022 draft season, was the fact that Stout was the number one punter for a lot of people. Now, there were other very quality punters, very good punters available in this class. Matt Araiza being one that I feel like could have been the top punter selected, but for Araiza, it was more of, all right, he has a super powerful leg and can absolutely just clobber balls 70, 80 yards, but the control isn't there as much as a player like Stout, who I think when you look at a potential Sam Cook replacement, you want somebody who can place the ball inside the 20, inside the 10, like we've seen Sam Cook do so many times. Stout has great hang time, great length on those punts. So he's an all-around prospect where you don't necessarily have to worry about him out kicking your coverage. It's usually he's very tactical with his punts. And if this is indeed the end of the road for Sam Cook, which it feels like it is, he's done so much for the organization, but to draft a player like Stout in the 4th round, it's confidence. His confidence in that player, and Ozzie Newsome clearly has confidence in Jordan Stout, and this organization does as well. So it's interesting to kind of feel out the thought process that this organization had with that, and kind of like where they fell in love with these players. Some at the Senior Bowl, others at the Combine, through the interview process. There are so many ways and so many different interview and showcases that this team can look and evaluate. And so the Senior Bowl is one where I think the Ravens saw a lot of different players there. And then Hortiz was asked to compare pass rushers David Ojabo and Odafe Oweh and said, quote, "The similarity is they're both fast, twitchy, athletic players. I'd say coming out, Ojabo is probably a little bit cleaner as a bender edge rusher, where Oweh's game was burst and power." And so if you can have those complement each other, those two games complement each other, it's going to create nightmares, because you can match up based off of tackle strengths and weaknesses, where if you have one player that does speed really well, another that does power really well, and you have tackles that either both play power well or both play speed well, you can have a matchup where you have, let's say, both tackles are better speed tackles. You can have Odafe Oweh with his power. If both tackles are better power tackles, you can have Ojabo with his speed. I mean, there are so many different aspects of what Ojabo and Oweh can do on the field together, and I'm really excited to see that. Obviously, we're not sure when that's going to really come to fruition, when we're going to be able to see that. It could be 2023, but I think that is well worth the risk, well worth the wait, and we'll talk about that a bit in the second segment. But I feel like to have the complement of Ojabo and Oweh, they are both super athletic, and we have seen the Ravens prioritize that skill set, I guess, more athletic players, especially in the earlier parts of drafts. Now, if you want to look to the later part of this draft in 2022, Ravens, they sacrifice some athleticism for skill and all that. Not saying athletic players aren't skilled. That's not what I'm saying whatsoever, but they drafted less athletic players in the 4th round-ish and in the 6th round, and with their final picks, as opposed to what they did in the earlier portion of this draft. So I'm excited to see what Ojabo and Oweh can do together. Hortiz was also asked about Travis Jones, the 3rd-round defensive tackle, and he said that he actually expects him to have more pass rushing burst because he won't play 70 plays a game like he did at UConn. And he said, quote, "That gives you more stamina in the game, helps you stay fresher, to help him be even more impactful on the play-to-play basis," end quote. And we've talked so much on this show, not just of the defensive tackle position, across the entire Ravens team, about how having the depth at certain positions like cornerback, for example, if you can have a rotation there and not necessarily have a guy play 80, 90% of snaps every single game, that keeps them fresh for the entire season into the playoffs. That helps a ton when you're looking at big games in December, big games in January, and hopefully in February, because guys are just worn down. They're worn out at that point of the season. And if you have been consistently playing around 60, 70% of snaps, while the guy you're going up against has been playing 90, 95% of snaps, that's advantage you if you have that low number of snaps. So I'm excited to see Travis Jones provide that interior pass rushing presence for sure. And then heading back to Stout, actually, Hortiz talked a little bit about the potential kickoff duty that he could have and save some wear and tear on Justin Tucker's leg. He said, quote, "Having that versatility to be able to give Justin a couple kickoffs off potentially is a great thing," end quote. And yeah, it's going to be, if Stout does get some kickoffs, which honestly, as the season wears on, I think that could be the case if you're not losing anything by putting one out there over the other. I think that'd be great to be able to save Justin Tucker's leg again, just like we talked about. Obviously, it's a little different for special teams versus offense and defense, but still, it's really important. I think that's an underrated aspect of special teams, where if a guy continues kicking and kicking and kicking, or punting and punting and punting, by the end of the season, they're pretty worn down, right? So to have a player like Stout who has that positional versatility, the Ravens love that. I think that'll be very valuable to the special teams unit. And then finally, Joe Hortiz called Kyle Hamilton a chess piece, something that I have said and a lot of other people have said as well, but Hortiz also views it that way. He said, quote, "You see that and you're fired up. You get a chance to take him at 14, that he fell to you. That's why you just think he's going to be gone, because he's a playmaker in multiple different levels of the defense," end quote. And yeah, this had to be a dream scenario for the Ravens, especially on defense, to be able to have a player like Hamilton fall to them. I mean, someone who I had going around pick 5. And a lot of people had going around pick 5. It wasn't just me. To be able to have a player like that fall to 14, obviously feels like the 40 time might have had a little impact on that. Hamilton didn't test as well as he wanted to in that aspect, but that's the Ravens' benefit. That's the Ravens' gain, right? They got a playmaker in Kyle Hamilton. He comes into a very good defense, and I feel like for the Ravens, it will help them be able to get their secondary back to what we have seen over the course of their franchise history, not what we saw in 2021. I think that will be a huge addition to the secondary, and he'll be able to slot in with Marcus Williams and with Chuck Clark, and obviously the corners with Marlon Humphrey, Marcus Peters, etc. It's going to be really fun to watch Kyle Hamilton in the Ravens defense for sure. But we'll talk about Kyle Hamilton and the other Ravens rookies that were taken on days 1 and 2 in the second segment of our show. So be sure to stay tuned for that. Still a ton to talk about here on Locked On Ravens. But first, I do want to tell you a bit about Blue Nile and whether she prefers a statement piece or an everyday subtle elegance. BlueNile.com has fine jewelry options for every mom. Shop high-quality classic diamond earrings, elegant tennis bracelets, or gemstone pendant necklaces. If you're looking for fine jewelry but have trouble choosing, Blue Nile has jewelry experts on hand 24/7, available via phone or chat to help you find a memorable gift at every budget. So this Mother's Day, give mom something she'll treasure forever with fine jewelry from BlueNile.com. And Locked On Sports listeners get $50 off of $500. This podcast exclusive is only good through Mother's Day, so use code Locked On. That's code Locked On. Plus, every order is insured, ships free, and arrives in discreet packaging. Don't give away what's inside. So stop stress-free and find your forever piece. Go to BlueNile.com today. We're back here, our second segment of Locked On Ravens here on Thursday. Kevin Oestreicher, your host, still hanging out with you here. And now we're going to dive into my official 2022 draft grades for the Ravens here in the second segment. We'll talk about day 1 and day 2. So I'm excited to dive into that, but also thank you for making Locked On Ravens your first listen of the day. If you're here with us on YouTube, be sure to subscribe to the channel, like the video. Thank you again for listening. And also in audio form, thank you for listening. Be sure to follow and turn notifications on. But all right, so let's talk day 1, a very eventful day 1. And I'll throw the Marquise Brown trade in here as well. So we'll talk about that after Kyle Hamilton. But Kyle Hamilton, the 14th pick in this draft, again, as I kind of talked about in the first segment, something I could have never imagined in my wildest dreams. This is an A+ all the way through and through. It is very interesting to think about, though, with what we know, with the hindsight. Would the Ravens have taken a wide receiver over Kyle Hamilton, knowing that they were going to be trading Marquise Brown just a few minutes later? The Titans did that with A.J. Brown and Treylon Burks. It feels like potentially if Chris Olave or Jameson Williams or Garrett Wilson was there, that might have been the pick. But personally, I would have taken Kyle Hamilton over those 3. And not that those 3 aren't great players and have the potential to be great NFL players. I mean, all 3 of them are super talented, and I really like all 3 of them as a prospect. But when a player with the talent that Kyle Hamilton has falls to you, you take him, no questions asked, in my opinion. And it's kind of like forcing for a need versus taking best player available. We've seen the Ravens do this time and time again where, they don't want to, let's say the best, how do I want to put this? The best cornerback on the board, right? Let's say that was the 30th best player and the Ravens are picking at 14, right? But that's a clear need for them. So they could go with the 30th best player and kind of risk that, have that 30th best player at 14, or the safety. So we'll say Kyle Hamilton is the 5th best player and you can get him at 14, but it's not a need, right? Well, I personally don't want to reach for the talent at a need when I could have an exceptional, absolute great talent at number 14 that could be the 5th pick or the 6th pick in another class, right? So I think that the best player available strategy for the most part is the strategy that I would use a lot of the time. Now, sometimes you do have to take for need, right? This is not like, okay, well, if the Ravens can get 7 great safeties every year, that's awesome. Best player available, right? No, you have to balance it out. But for a player like Hamilton, who can play multiple levels of the defense, like Joe Hortiz talked about, who is very versatile, has the size, I think has the speed, the play speed, maybe not the 40 speed, but I think he has the play speed. I think that it's all super valuable. And especially now, the Ravens secondary is a force to be reckoned with. So best player available was the strategy there for me. As Hamilton continued to fall, I would have traded up for him. I would have moved up a couple picks, honestly. And I thought, again, the pick that the Eagles moved up to at 13, I thought that was for Hamilton, but they took Jordan Davis, and that was that. So this was an absolute no-brainer pick for me. It was the pick that once Hamilton started sliding past like 9, 10, I'm like, all right, Kyle Hamilton me. Like bring me Kyle Hamilton on the Ravens. And I think this will be a pick that pays off for a very long time. I'm very excited about Kyle Hamilton, one of my favorites in this class. And again, just I had no inkling he would fall to the Ravens at 14. He does. And again, it's the Ravens' benefit. So A+ for the Kyle Hamilton acquisition, I guess, selection for me. Next, we'll talk about Marquise Brown and I guess his acquisition by the Arizona Cardinals, the Ravens trading him away and pick number 100 for pick number 23. Now, again, this was just completely out of left field. The organization did a great job keeping it a secret. I don't think anybody had any idea what was going on there for a little bit. I know I didn't. I give this a solid A, circumstances included, right? Obviously, the Ravens had to trade Brown, in my opinion. That's what I think. I think that once the request came in from Marquise Brown that, hey, I don't really want to be here anymore, I want to move on, I wouldn't keep him at that point. At that point, you want to get him to a situation where he's happy, not just for him, which is, what the Ravens have done, but for the organization, where it's like, all right, I personally would want that to become something toxic where Marquise Brown gets 2 targets one game and all of a sudden something blows up and you just have to kind of be like, oh man, like this thing wouldn't really be worth it at that point. So to move off of Marquise Brown after having 3 years of Marquise Brown and still getting a first round pick when Marquise Brown was a first round pick 3 years ago, I think that's great value. I mean, again, Marquise Brown was taken at pick 25 3 years ago. Tyler Linderbaum, we'll talk about in a second, was pick 25 3 years later. And the Ravens have Linderbaum now for at least 4 years, potentially 5, depending on the 5th-year option. But I think for the risk of having everything go south if Brown was still on the team and something didn't go right, to move off of him now, get him to a situation where it works for him and works for the organization, just fresh starts for both. Circumstances involved, I give that an A, because obviously trading away your number 1 wide receiver hurts. Obviously Lamar Jackson, him being his best friend on the team, that probably hurts both of them, right? But I feel like, again, it was the best thing for both Brown and the organization, especially if Brown put that trade request out there, and it just feels like best for them to move on and do their separate things. So that's an A for me for getting the first-round pick. Then the Ravens trade that first-round pick to the Buffalo Bills for pick 25 and pick 130. Then the Ravens take Tyler Linderbaum at pick 25, with Jermaine Johnson still on the board. And again, I really do not know what contributed to Jermaine Johnson's fall. Jermaine Johnson would have been my pick there at 25. Not that I don't think Linderbaum is talented. I think he is. But to me, I think Johnson, assuming there's no character stuff or stuff that I just do not know about at this point, if there is, I would, leave a comment below if you know why Jermaine Johnson followed. I mean, I do not. But I feel like for Linderbaum in particular, the Ravens do not invest in the center position a lot, right? It's been not a lot of draft capital, not a lot of big money. They bucked that trend this season, or I guess during this draft season, where they bring in one of the best centers to come out of college in a very long time, someone who is uber athletic, can get to the second level, plays with a bit of a nasty streak as well. He's also very competitive. Now, the big concerns with Linderbaum, he's a little undersized. The arm length isn't there that you would want it to be, I think, in an ideal circumstance. And also, the scheme fit for the Ravens, assuming it does stay the same, is not the best that it could be throughout the entire NFL. So those are all things that people have voiced concerns about. I'm also interested to see what they do with him and how they kind of mask those concerns. And I'm not saying Linderbaum can't be a good player, right? I had said throughout the entire draft process, Linderbaum is not a wonderful fit for the scheme at this point, but that does not mean he does not have the potential to be a great, great player in Baltimore for a very long time. And I'm excited that the Ravens will have this kind of staple center for at least the next couple of seasons to see what they have in him there. Now, hopefully he's not a Garrett Bradbury type who plays in the Minnesota Vikings, was the first round pick for them a couple of years ago and hasn't really panned out. But I feel like Linderbaum he's a bit more technically sound and just has a bit more going for him in that aspect in terms of athleticism and getting out to the second level and pulling and doing all this kind of stuff. So I feel like for what the Ravens have in Linderbaum, it was a solid pick. I give it a B-, right? Someone who, for Jermaine Johnson being there, kind of lowers the grade a little bit. And the B- is not like I hate the pick, right? I like the pick. I think it's fine. But I would just have rather maybe taken other players there and seeing what was on the board. It was a little difficult in terms of Linderbaum versus Johnson. But again, I'm completely content with Tyler Linderbaum. Do not take this as I am anti-Tyler Linderbaum. That is not what it is whatsoever. I'm still completely okay with this selection. So that was day 1. Moving on to day 2 after my grades of, was it A+, A, and B- for the 3 day 1 moves. Day 2 brought David Ojabo and Travis Jones. Now, let's talk about Ojabo first. This was an A for me. I had said throughout the entire draft process that if Linderbaum, if David Ojabo was there at number 45 after his injury, I'd take him, no questions asked. That's what the Ravens did. I'm very glad they did it. Now, Ojabo is a player that wins with his speed and athleticism. Joe Hortiz talked about that. We talked about in the first segment. But this is a player who still has so much to learn, has so much potential. And I feel like, again, this is almost like having a first-round pick in 2023, assuming Ojabo does not play in 2022. Now, that has not been confirmed. We probably will not know for a very long time when he will be suiting up for the first time. But if it is 2023, I'm content with that because it's pretty much trading a 2022 second for a 2023 first. I'm taking that 10 times out of 10. David Ojabo and Odafe Oweh have the potential to be the duo, the pass rushing duo for this team for a very, very long time. Ojabo only really had one season on the field of Michigan and just lit the world on fire there. He really played exceptional football and still showed that, yeah, this is what I can be and this is what I am, but hey, I can grow into something so much more than this. And I think that's what the enticing part is about that, to be able to learn under this defense. If they bring back Justin Houston, to be able to learn under a veteran like Justin Houston and also some of the other veterans on the roster, this is a great pick. It's one that might not pay off in the immediate future. But I think when we look at this pick 2, 3, 5, 10 years down the line, we'll talk about how great of a pick it was for the Ravens. So I'm giving that one an A. Travis Jones, thought you couldn't do better than David Ojabo. Travis Jones in the third round, that's an A+. Absolute A+. How Travis Jones was available at 76 in the first place, I do not know. If you know why, also leave a comment below. But this is a player that, with the defensive line, re-signing Calais Campbell, I guess with Calais Campbell being re-signed on the defensive line, they didn't need to take one, I guess, in the first 2 days. But the fact that Jones was available, we talk about best player available all the time. We just talked about it for a while there. I think that you couldn't turn down the opportunity to select a player like Travis Jones, who provides interior pass rushing presence, had 8.5 sacks over at UConn during his college career, pushes the pocket, good in the run game, gets to learn under a player like Calais Campbell. You look at the veteran mentorship there. I think that's a perfect situation. He doesn't have to be asked to be the number one guy right away. I think he's a great part for the future. The Ravens, they still have a little bit more work to do in that aspect. Obviously, Calais Campbell, not the future. Michael Pierce, not the future. Derek Wolfe, not the future. But to have players like Travis Jones and Justin Madubuike and Broderick Washington, that's a good start. It's a pretty good start. You probably have to invest a little more in there, especially as the veterans continue to grow older a little bit and then ultimately retire or leave or do whatever. But I think for Travis Jones, having a player like that in your defensive line rotation, I think he can carve out a role pretty early on. I think he can hold that role. And if the Ravens suffer an injury on the defensive line, they will have quality young depth to be able to step up in that situation, something where in multiple positions we just didn't see that at all in 2021. So for the Ravens, a very, very good first 2 days. It honestly couldn't have gone much better for him. I know trading away Marquise Brown hurts, and the Linderbaum pick wasn't popular among some people, but I still feel like, all things considered, hindsight and everything, the Ravens had a very, very incredible 2022 draft on days 1 and on day 2. But we'll head into our final break here, though. When we get back, we'll be diving into grades for day 3, talking about the 6th, 4th round picks, as well as the final selection for the Ravens in the 6th round. So be sure to stay tuned. Still a ton to talk about on Locked On Ravens. So first, I want to tell you a bit about Bet Online and the NBA playoffs still chugging along here. The Denver Nuggets no longer in it. Still very sad about it, but it's fine. But there are matchups like the Bucks and the Celtics and the Suns and the Mavericks, etc. And BetOnline.net is your number one source for all your sports betting stats and info. BetOnline is your continued source for all your sports wagering information, from live betting, the playoffs, esports, and more. So to the website today. Use your mobile device to learn more about the trends in action. BetOnline, where the game starts. We're back here. Our final segment of Locked On Ravens. Kevin Allstreicher, your host, still here with you. And again, thank you for making Locked On Ravens your first listen of the day. I really do appreciate that. Be sure to subscribe on YouTube and follow us in audio form wherever you are watching or listening. And also be sure to make your second listen of the day after Locked On Ravens, Locked On NFL. We have weekly content over there daily, 5 days a week as well, talking about all the latest stories throughout the NFL. Well, let's talk about this Ravens draft class. We talked about day 1 and day 2. Let's move into day 3. 6 4th round picks. Wow. I was not expecting to be talking about 6 4th round picks. I thought maybe they could have traded a couple, moved up in the 4th round. I thought that they could even, at the end of day 2, maybe package 2 4th rounders, move up in the 3rd round for a player. They they took all 6 of those 4th round picks and they used them on players. The first one at number 110 being tackle Daniel Falele out of Minnesota. Now, this was a player who was mocked to the Ravens in the 2nd round at 45 for months and months and months. And what do the Ravens do? They take the best player available. It's a player to position a need. This is an A+ for me. I love Falele as a prospect. I think that he has the potential to grow into his role, much like Orlando Brown Jr. did. Doesn't necessarily have to start right away. And we didn't see Orlando Brown start right away in Baltimore, right? He was a player that was behind players. Remember these guys, James Hurst, right? James Hurst played some right tackle out there. He also played some guard, but James Hurst played a lot of right tackle for the Ravens during Orlando Brown Jr.'s rookie season in 2018. And then Orlando Brown Jr. steps into that role, and the Ravens have the whole left guard rotation in the playoffs that year, and it was a disaster, and they almost come back and win. But Orlando Brown Jr. grew into his role during his rookie season. The Ravens now have Morgan Moses and Jawan James for Falele to learn from, which I think is an amazing duo to learn from. And you can kind of ease him into action and be able to work with him on nuanced things, on technique, and just things that he has to improve on. He's not a perfect prospect, right? He's a very raw prospect. He is an Australian. He ended up playing rugby for a while, is very new to football. So you have the opportunity to help him grow into his potential, which I think he has a lot of. So this was an A+ pick for me. I thought he'd be gone by the time the Ravens took it 110. He was there. The Ravens snagged him, and I think that was the absolute right selection. Then at number 119, the Ravens take their first corner of the draft, taking Jalen Armour-Davis out of Alabama. And yeah, the Alabama corners, the Ravens end up getting rid of Anthony Averett. He ends up leaving for the Las Vegas Raiders. He was an Alabama corner. The Ravens said, hey, you know what? We need some more Alabama corners to go along with Marlon Humphrey. So they bring in Jalen Armour-Davis, and this is a good pick. I really like this one. I give this one an A. He was one of my favorite corners. I thought he could go a little more early in the 4th round, maybe even late day 2, like 3rd round-ish. But this is a guy who is very long, has some great length, some good speed, also a very good frame, has had some injury concerns a little bit, but he's also a very willing tackler and is like a developmental piece, right? He's someone who you don't have to play in big situations right away. And for Baltimore with Marlon Humphrey and Marcus Peters hopefully returning from those injuries, you don't have to have him in a role where he's playing 90% of snaps early on. He can contribute, right? Maybe special teams also, but this is a player that you can use in a bunch of different aspects, and you can ease him in again to a role. So I'm giving this one an A. I really liked him as a prospect, and I'm glad that he's in Baltimore now, and I'm sure the Ravens are too, talking about another Alabama corner. Then at 128, Charlie Kolar, the tight end out of Iowa State, was the selection. I'll give this one an A-, right? Solid player, one of the best tight ends left on the board. Great pass catcher, a little bit of work to do in the run game. But I thought that for what the Ravens value in tight ends, it made a lot of sense. And he slots in with Mark Andrews and Nick Boyle. The Ravens have needed a 3rd tight end for a while now after the departure of Hayden Hurst. Haven't really found that guy behind Andrews and Boyle. I think Kolar has the potential to be that guy. And the Ravens will work with him on his blocking, right? We remember what Mark Andrews was as a blocker coming out of Oklahoma. It wasn't what he is now. You know, he has the potential to grow into that role as a blocker. Not saying he just can't block anyone, because he is a decent blocker. It's just I think he's a much better pass catcher at this point in his career than he is as a blocker. So I think for what the Ravens were able to get there, I call it an A-, a very solid pick overall. Don't have any qualms about it. Then at 130, Jordan Stout was the pick, the punter. This was, I think, the most controversial selection of the Ravens 2022 draft, especially because there was a player named Calvin Austin on the board who the Steelers took one pick before the Ravens at 139, who the Ravens apparently wanted, and instead the punter goes, and you're kind of thinking, all right, what are the Ravens doing? But I understand why. We kind of talked about it in the first segment. It seems like this is the end of the road for Sam Cook with this selection, right? The Ravens, I would be shocked if they kept 2 punters on this roster. In fact, I wouldn't want them to do it. And they're not going to cut a 4th rounder they just took. So it seems like Sam Cook will be on the way out eventually. But in a player to replace him, again, Stout emulates Cook in a lot of ways. I like the punt placement. That's where I am looking. The hang time, the leg, all those things combined is why Stout was number 1 on a lot of people's boards in terms of punters. And you kind of look at what Peter King had to say in his article on Monday, where the Ravens didn't know where a punter was going to go, and it looked like the Buccaneers were going to take one, and then they actually did take one with the second pick that they had over there. I think it was 137 where they took him after Stout. So the Bucs got the second punter in the draft, and then you ended up having the Bengals potentially taking a punter. Then a team tried to call the Ravens to take the punter, right? So there were a lot of teams that wanted to take Jordan Stout around that range. And so if the Ravens didn't take him, then they probably wouldn't have got him at all. And so they valued special teams. The Ravens value special teams. I'll give it a B minus. Obviously, taking a punter in that situation, you hope he can turn into what Sam Cook was for this organization. There's not going to be another Sam Cook, but hopefully Stout can get pretty darn close to that. And I hope that everything works out with it. I have confidence it will. You know, the Ravens have been very good at evaluating special teams talent for a very long time. Cough, cough, Justin Tucker. That guy's pretty good. Cough, cough, Kari Vedvik. He was good for like 2 weeks, and the Ravens got a fifth-round pick for him. Like, okay. So I think that for what the Ravens have done from evaluating special teams, I trust them. I'll trust them on this pick. I give it a B minus, but I think that it has the potential to be a very solid pick for years to come for them. Then at 139, Isaiah Likely was the selection at number 139. That I like Likely. I like him as a prospect a lot. He can line up in multiple different aspects. Obviously, the 40 speed wasn't necessarily there, but I think the game speed is there. When you watch the tape, he bursts off of it. Great hands, great awareness overall, high football IQ. The Ravens could use him a lot as a wide receiver this year as well. So even though the Ravens didn't draft a wide receiver in this class, they could use Likely a little bit like that if they needed to. But I liked the Likely pick for sure. So I'll give that one an A minus. I liked it overall. Then at number 141, the Ravens take Demario Williams, the corner from Houston. Now, I didn't know a ton about Williams. I knew about his teammate, Marcus Jones, who was a third-round pick by the Patriots. But Williams is someone very tenacious, very competitive. He's a willing tackler, sticky in coverage. He's your Tavon Young replacement pretty much, right? And I think getting a Tavon Young replacement in the fourth round of a six-player fourth-round class where Tavon Young was a corner in the five-player fourth-round class a couple of years ago, it's kind of funny how that all works out. But I think there's the potential here for sure. He has the versatility Williams does to play on the outside, play safety, but I think you're going to stick him in the slot there and be kind of content with what he does. So I'll give it a B minus, a player that has some shortcomings. He's very undersized. So I think that's where you stick him in the slot and you say, all right, no outside reps, but it's a solid pick overall. I don't hate it whatsoever. The Ravens doubling down at corner, I think is very smart, especially with the guys they lost. So I'm glad they ended up doing that for sure. And at number 196 in the sixth round, Tyler Beatty, the running back out of Missouri, was the selection. And it was very well known that the Ravens were probably going to take a running back in this draft at some point. And Beatty being available at 196, I thought he was going to go in like the fourth, fifth round. So to have him available in the sixth was, again, great value. Bounces off of players, super competitive, very good as a pass catcher. He can work himself in on early downs too. He's a chess piece for this offense, I think. And with the recoveries of J.K. Dobbins and Gus Edwards hopefully going well, but if there's a setback for either of those guys, Beatty can slot in and take some snaps. I think Beatty will win the final roster spot for the running backs. I think they'll keep three, and it will be Dobbins, Edwards, and Beatty. But if one has to start the season on the PUP list, Beatty can, again, carve himself out a pretty big role. So I give that pick an A minus. I really like him as a player. Think he could be a steal, and we might be looking back on this pick and being like, how was he available so late? It's unbelievable how sometimes these things can work out. So overall, I give the Ravens draft class a high A minus, right? This is a draft class that top to bottom, uber talented. I'm very, very happy with it. A couple picks where you might be thinking, all right, what is this guy going to do? What is that guy going to do? And a high A minus, I know some people will be probably thinking only an A minus. Like, what are you talking about? This was a A plus A draft class. I really, really, really like the draft class. I think it was one of the best draft classes that this team has had in a very long time, just based off potential, off of talent. So this is not me saying the draft class is bad. A high A minus, like a 92, 93. That's really good. Some teams get like a 60 draft grade from me. So I really like what the Ravens did. This was a phenomenal job by the Ravens and Eric DeCosta and company and everybody involved to secure a draft class that is very deep, both on the defense and offensive sides of the ball. And you're able to do a lot with these prospects. And I'm excited to see how they all work out. So a high A minus for me is my final draft grade for 2022 for the Baltimore Ravens. But that's all I have for you today here on Locked On Ravens. Thank you so much for tuning in. When we get back here, we'll be rounding out the week with more Ravens talk. So be sure to stay tuned for that. And I will see you tomorrow.